some strategies and tips that Nick has gathered for a smooth transition. So thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Victoria. I'm an account manager at BetterPros, and I'll be hosting this event alongside with Nicolas Catellier, founder of BIM Pure. So how are you, Nick?
I'm great. Thanks a lot for the invitation. Super happy to be here. And it's really fun to be collaborating with BetterPros.
Oh, we're so happy to have you here. I'm super excited, to be working with this. We've been going through this initiative for some time now, and I'm very happy that we're here to go deeper into this subject and hearing all of our audience questions. So before getting started, for those who are new at BetterPros, we are a talent solution firm that connects top talent from Latin America alongside with companies in the States and in Canada. So if you want to know more about our company and what we do and how we do it, you can find the link to our website in the chat box. So, feel free to go and take a look before getting started. And today, as I said it before, we've got Nicolas, founder of BIM Pure, joining us, and also a consultant for many years now, right? Working with BIM methodologies, not only in helping, studios and larger firms in the transition from CAD to Revit, but also in helping them improve their workflow in the overall. So, we've got a lot to talk, today. And if you still haven't signed for the event, you're still on time. And it's great for you to register because, after the event, we're going to send you an email with all the information that we'll be going over today on Nick's presentation and some other information that we've gathered for you to, learn more about Revit and everything. So, okay, we're going to wait a few minutes before getting started. So I think it's important to mention that if you have any questions or even suggestions, or you want to share some experience that we've had or perhaps a challenge that you've had during this transition, then you can definitely leave your comments in the chat box, since we'll have a special Q&A session where Nick will be responding to all of those questions, and we'll be happy, to share your experiences as well. So I think we can get started, Nick. How about?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you know, I do live streaming on YouTube too, on a show called BIMPure Live. And something that I like to ask the audience when I start is, where are you watching from? So if you're watching live, you can type in the chat where you're from. Always fun to see where everyone are located.
Exactly. I think we've got a few from Argentina that have been greeting, and also from California. We've got some studios from California as well. So thank you for joining us. And please leave all your comments. Nick is super passionate about his work, and he really, from Brazil as well. Okay. Thanks, Luisa, for joining us. Okay, Medellin, Colombia. Okay. Great. Have you been to Colombia, Nick?
No, I've never been to South America. So maybe that should be my next trip.
Definitely. Oh, Belgium. Okay, that's interesting. Dax from Texas. Okay, great. Miami. Okay.
All right, ready to get started?
Great. Without any further, let's get started, Nick. We've got a lot to talk about.
Okay, so first I should introduce myself. I am Nicolas Catellier. I'm from Quebec City, Canada. Yes, I am French-Canadian. I am an architect and a BIM specialist. I've worked for many years as an architect and BIM manager at Atelier 21 Architects, where I help with the CAD to BIM transition, which is today's topic. In 2021, I decided to quit my job and go into my own as a founder at BIM Pure. So as a BIM consultant, since I've been helping multiple firms in the industry. And in 2016, I've started a blog. At first, it was called Revit Pure. It was a blog and YouTube channel, and it started growing. I started releasing courses, and eventually it also morphed into BIM Pure to be more inclusive of the diversity of tools. I've also been a speaker at the BAIL conference, Autodesk University, on the BIM Pure Live, another YouTube show, and other conferences as well. So I should explain what BIM Pure is. So it's a subscription-based learning platform with 600 plus members. We've just launched this subscription service in February. And I'm also a consultant for various clients in the AC industry. I do actually see a few of my clients. So I do see Eli, as written there. I'm working with the wood industry, prefab shops, architects, engineers, all sorts of clients. So about the BIM Pure membership, it offers courses ranging from beginners to advanced, mostly by me, but we're starting more and more to incorporate courses from different experts. It's a mix of pre-recorded videos, PDF, live masterclasses, also downloadable content, templates, family collections, scripts, and more. And yeah, about BetterPros. So that's, maybe you can chat about that, Victoria. So I can talk about my own experience. BetterPros talent solution with over 1,000 professionals that they screen monthly. And I've been working with BetterPros for some people helping me with diverse Revit and BIM tasks, but also for other tasks. I've been working with a video editor that BetterPros helped me found. And also even programming. I've been needing help with my website, and BetterPros had someone to help me with some complex task with JavaScript and a portal that I struggled to help with. So BetterPros helped me with that. And what I like about it as a small business owner, having employees can be complicated, especially if it's full-time. With BetterPros, the whole process is simplified. I just need to pay a monthly bill, and it can be part-time hire or full-time, depending on their needs. Anything else to say, Victor? Did I say everything I needed to?
No, I think you've done it great. But yes, exactly. You've been working with Julio for some time now, specifically in architectural services, but also, as you mentioned, with some integrations for your website. So you can all go check Nick's website for all of his courses. You know, we've had some professionals working on that website as well. So we've been over a whole different fields, not only architecture, engineering, but also accounting positions, marketing, and as you've mentioned, some IT as well. So thank you for that. It's been a pleasure working alongside with you.
All right, so let's keep on going and let's talk a little bit about architecture. So I will be talking about Revit and BIM, but my first love is architecture. That's what I've studied in. So whenever I present, I try to showcase some of the projects I've worked on along the years, because in the end, that's the end goal of what we're trying to do, beautiful designs and beautiful projects. Even if I specialize in BIM, that's still one of my biggest passions. So in there, I showcase a few projects I had the chance to work in the last few years. The first thing I wanted to start with is the definition of BIM. So the name of the session is CAD to Revit, but it could also be CAD to BIM. So I can help to distinguish the two. BIM means building information modeling. And although this was mostly an academic term in the past, when Autodesk acquired Revit back in 2002, they needed a marketing strategy to push something different from AutoCAD. So they came up with this term BIM. In a way to promote Revit as something completely different from CAD. Ever since this terminology BIM came off, and now it represents way more than just Revit. There are multiple solutions, process, and workflows. So just to be clear, BIM is about the process. There's no single app that represents the entirety of BIM. And Revit is a specific application, of course. But still, I would say Revit is probably the biggest BIM application that people think about when they think about BIM. Let's talk about some of the benefits. If some of you aren't sure or don't know if this is a transition to it or not, the benefits of BIM is in the old CAD days, you had to modify multiple files and views when an element is moved. For example, if you move a door in the plan view, it also have to move in elevation separately. While in BIM, you just move in a single view in the 3D model, and the position is adjusted everywhere. So a coordinate set of plans, of documents, is one of the key advantages of using BIM documents instead of CAD. And also the data-rich modeling aspect. If you have a nice model that is precise, you can do cost estimations, rendering, you can export to other tools, you can do all sorts of analysis. So plenty of benefits of using an accurate model instead of disconnected 2D CAD drawings. Also the idea of a single source of truth. If you don't know what something is on a project, if the model is good, assuming it is, you can open the model and check it out, instead of in the old workflows having a CAD drawing and using SketchUp models in addition, and then trying to play ping pong between trying to know which one is actually accurate or not. Yeah, I found that GIF pretty funny. That's one of my favorite architecture GIF. Yeah, I want to talk about some of the pitfalls and challenges of BIM, even though I'm a big BIM proponent and I love it. I think it's good to give some words of warning. It's not all rainbows and unicorns, right? So here are some challenges that you will face in trying to implement BIM. BIM requires hard work, focus, technical knowledge, constant learning. And I feel that some of the benefits can be oversold, exaggerated. Maybe you hear sometimes of 5D, 6D, 7D. I mean, these are acronyms that mean different things, but I think it implies that it's a bit too easy. These are complex things, and it requires a lot of work. It's not something instant that you unlock the moment you start doing BIM. And if you're doing the transition from CAD, you might not gain time efficiency on the first couple of projects. It may take a while before you start to see the real benefits. And something else, licenses are expensive. If you're doing the transition, you might be surprised by the bill you receive from Autodesk, especially if you're working on the cloud. So that's something to keep in mind. The BIM language and acronyms are complex. I've mentioned 5D, 6D, 7D, but there are plenty of other kind of jargon terminology that you'll be facing. Typically, when I work, I try not to use too complex terminology. I like to use simple words. So that's what I'm trying to do in this presentation. Something else is Revit development and updates sometimes feel slow. There have been open letters from architects criticizing Revit in the last few years, saying, can you develop it faster? Can you add more features more quickly? There's some things we've asked for years, but we're still not seeing these features in the software. So yeah, sometimes it's a bit frustrating, the pace of development, but at the same time, it's a pretty complex piece of software. So that's one reason. Okay, so I've just named multiple challenges with BIM, but despite all of these, I think it's still completely worth it. And if you're still doing CAD and wondering if you should go to BIM, the answer is probably so, despite all these challenges that we'll be facing. Okay, so I would like you to type in the chat, what's the biggest challenge you have in implementing BIM? So I'm wondering, maybe some of you haven't done transition at all, some of you are in the middle of it, some of you have done it. But if you can type what's the most difficult thing that you found? Is it training? Is it paying the licenses? Is it finding other consultants to work with that are also using Revit and BIM? So let us know in the chat. I'll keep on going, but I'll come back later to have a look. Let's talk about CAD versus BIM. I like this chart because it is about the time you've spent in each phase. And when doing BIM, I'm talking about BIM generally speaking, because it applies not only to Revit, but other BIM software as well. It could apply to ArchiCAD too. So in this case, when you're working with a BIM methodology, typically it takes much more time at the beginning of a project during the design phase, because you have to model the entire building. It takes longer. While in AutoCAD, you don't have to do all this work. However, as the project progresses and you are in the documentation and coordination phase, normally it should take less time and everything should be much faster. If you have a precise model, then you just need to annotate it and you get a coordinated set of documents. So it means you have to be patient and you have to spend a lot of time in the early phase of a project if you want to reap the benefits later on. And I wanted to show this at the slide too, don't panic, because something very typical that I see is some firms getting started with BIM panic at the beginning of their first project, and then they go back to CAD. That's something I see very, very often with people getting started. So you can see they're like, oh my God, we've spent so many billable hours just modeling, and we don't even have a set of documents yet. like, okay, that's too much. Let's go back to CAD for this project, else we're going to bust. But that's the wrong thing to do, right? So be patient, don't panic, and do your job of modeling the project accurately, and it should be all good. Okay, so these are general ideas about BIM. Now, I want to talk about Revit a little more specifically. And just before going there, I'll just having a glance at the chat. We'll keep some Q&As at the end, but I just wanted to know what are some of the challenges to know and master every tool possible in such a complex program, the price of Revit and training, getting used to edit families and all the non-standard, working with historical building, identifying the first project to leap into BIM, convincing the senior that Revit offers significant advantages over CAD. Yeah, you can show, you'll receive the slides after that, so maybe you can show that.
Yeah, and hiring for training, hiring architect specialists in BIM. So yeah, we'll go over that a little bit later, but it's good to know. Keep on asking.
For sure. Yeah. Okay, so first I want to talk about some of the Revit pricing. As you mentioned, it's quite an expensive piece of software. And you have the Revit LT version. So I often get the question, is Revit LT fine for my work? Should I use this version? Revit LT is much cheaper. It's at $540 per year, while the regular Revit is at almost $3,000. That's US dollars, by the way. And if you get the AC collection that includes AutoCAD 2, it's at $3.5K a year. So Revit LT, the difference is typically if you're doing work sharing. Work sharing means multiple users are working at the same time in the same model. That's called work sharing. If you want to do that, you need the regular Revit. So if I would say almost all medium to big firms are using the regular Revit, Revit LT is not a good match for them. There are also less advanced modeling features, limited interoperability. You cannot use plugins in Revit LT. There are no MEP and advanced structural tools. So basically, who can use Revit LT? And I would say if you're a sole practitioner or a very small team doing mostly like houses, for example, small residential project, Revit LT might be a good pick for you since it's much cheaper. For everyone else, yeah, sadly, you have to pay the full price, especially if you're working with engineers, for example, and you want to collaborate on models. In that case, you'll most likely need the full Revit. Revit in the cloud. So ever since the pandemic, people are now working on what used to be called BIM 360, sometimes called Autodesk Construction Cloud, ACC. And instead of having a Revit model on your hard drive or on your local server, it's placed in the cloud, and you can sync and work from anywhere in the world without access to a network and allow everyone to access your model much more easily. But that's an extra cost. You need a BIM Collaborate Pro license at $945 per year on top of the regular license. So if you're getting started, maybe you don't need this unless you have other consultants or colleagues using this. You can just start with the regular Revit. Okay, a couple of success stories from a CAD to BIM transition. The first one, I've worked for 10 years as an architect and BIM manager at Atelier 21 Architects. In fact, I was hired there with the goal of helping them with the transition of going from CAD to BIM. And that worked. At first, we were doing 0 projects in Revit and BIM. And when I left in 2021, basically every single new project was done in Revit. So it took a few years. Like every year, slowly and slowly, a bigger percentage of the projects were done with BIM or with Revit, I should say in this case. And ever since I made the switch to a consultant, I've also worked with many people in the industry, but a few architects too. For example, I've worked with a medium-sized architecture firm in Montreal, specialized in multi-housing. I've helped with the whole transition from CAD to Revit, and now more than 80% of the new projects are made with Revit. And what's nice about it too is, as I mentioned, I love architecture, I love design. In this case, we can use BIM and we can use Revit to explore some parametric design. You can see this is a facade where we played with a 3D brick pattern, and I've helped that was done with combining Revit and Dynamo, which is a visual programming interface. Okay, so let's move on to some concrete tips. So I've done, as you saw, just done a transition where things went really well. I'll be honest, some transitions things didn't go as well as I expected. So I try every time that happens, I'm trying, okay, what went wrong here? How can we improve for the next? What is the lesson from this? And if things are not going that well, what can I tell them so it goes better? So the first thing I would say is plan the transition. If you're yet transitioning, have a plan with a clear goal. For example, have 50% of your firm new projects are in Revit in the next 6 months. And ensure everyone on the team is backing the plan. If one of the partner is not fully invested in the plan, this transition is less likely to succeed. That's something I saw a few times where there were 3 partners, and one of them, you could feel they were not totally up to it. It's like, what's this BIM thing? It's expensive. We're doing architecture. We're not doing this kind of IT complex thing. So they didn't necessarily get it. They didn't see the point, and it makes the transition much harder because sometimes it feels like self-sabotage. The next one, get proper training. Ensure all staff is properly trained before sending them to projects. I would say, though, that the training is not done after the basics. So you might have intensive training and then get started on a project, but that's not over at that time. You should leave non-billable time for the staff to train and improve workflows. So a few hours a week where the staff can just explore YouTube videos or maybe BIMPure courses and lessons. And so many good resources out there. And something else that I recommend, there are good conferences. The Autodesk University Conference upcoming in October in San Diego. I'm actually speaking there. So that's a really good way. The first time I went to one of these conferences was in 2015, and I came back from there, and I've learned so much, and we've implemented multiple new workflows and changes to the way we've worked. So worth it to send people to conferences.
That's great to know, Nicolas. I wasn't aware that you were participating, so great. Congrats for that.
Thanks. Yeah, currently prepping my talk for Autodesk University. Okay, the next one. Let's talk about computers. If at my old firm, when we got started, they didn't change all the computers immediately, right? Trying to save some money. And I remember one of my teammates was working in Revit, and she hated Revit. And she was like, this is the worst. I want to go back to CAD and I don't like it. After a while, I found out she was using a terrible computer where the specs that didn't work at all for her. And every click in Revit, it was kind of a 5 seconds lag. Totally unusable experience. And just a bad experience overall for her. So my recommendation, make sure that you have the computers that you need for your work in Revit. I can give a few cues quickly of the components you should be looking for. Revit doesn't really use the graphic cards a little bit, but it's mostly the processor. And also some people think you need quadro graphic card. You just can use a regular gaming card, NVIDIA RTX or GTX series, that's fine. Solid slate drive, SSD, get one with at least 1 terabyte to install Revit. So one laptop I purchased a few years ago, I had the mistake of buying a super small SSD to install Revit, and it was always full, and I was always needed to uninstall stuff. So make sure you get a big SSD and install Revit and store all your models in it. Revit is a single core application, so make sure you get a processor of at least 2.5 gigahertz. In terms of RAM, memory, 32 gigabyte is recommended, 64 if you have really huge models. Also, these days, it's more the norm. When I started back in 2012, a bit less, but having 2 monitors, it helps a lot. I would say it's a must when working with Revit. So overall, don't try to save with a cheap computer because you will lose money with a wasted time. So just get the computers that you need for your team or for yourself.
And Nick, since you're talking about it, is Revit compatible to all operational systems?
Not Mac.
Okay.
Just Windows.
Good to know.
Okay, next, pick a good first project. So you have to pick carefully. Project should be ideally relatively simple. But I said the most important, depends on the size of your team, but pick a team of people that are excited, enthusiastic about working on that project. I would say that's the most crucial one. Don't put the reluctant users in your team on the first BIM project. That's not a good idea. pick the most enthusiastic user in the team, and deadlines should be too tight, right? If you have a project with super tight deadline, what's going to happen? You remember the panic slide? You're going to go back to CAD because, oh, we need to get out deliverables, and Revit is not cutting it for this project. And also, don't wait something that's not in the text, but don't wait too long before picking the first project. If you aren't sure, just pick one that's upcoming and just try it out, and you'll learn on the spot. Fight resistance to change. So that's one of the biggest, for sure. So I do have some respect, actually, for if there are experienced CAD users. They've been working with CAD for 20 plus years. They've got their little workflows. They've got their commands. They know what they're doing. And suddenly, you take all of that and you put it in the trash can, right? Because now it's a whole different game. It's on Revit. And people are sometimes a bit scared of that. They don't like it. They're fighting the change. And so the solution to it is provide a lot of training. Make sure that if these users receive all training they need. And also, if you have a power user, you can get on board, support them constantly. Yeah, that's actually this slide. Get a BIM champion on board. So it can be someone internal, or it can be someone that you hire, or it can be someone that you get through BetterPros to help you out with your first project, setting up the standards. Ideally, it should be someone that is just loves technology, loves exploring, loves learning, happy to solve problem, someone that's great with Revit. It can be someone internal, or you can hire someone just for that. And sometimes, actually, I say one user, people can split the task. With one of my clients, they decided instead of having one BIM manager, one key Revit user, they would split the task into 4 different people, so it wouldn't be too much of a burden. And it's actually been working pretty well. These are kind of the 4 key resources in the team, and when people have questions, they can ask different members instead of a single person. Okay, work in 3D views. So if you were used to CAD, you might forget to work with 3D views. You're actually building a model. Never forget that, because CAD users sometimes forget they're building a model and they're stuck in more of this 2D mode of thinking. And you see funny things like that, where you kind of have lights floating in the model that in front of garage doors instead of being on the wall. That's because that user didn't check and verify the 3D model. And so you have weird things going on like that. So keep a 3D view open, have a look at it to make sure what you're modeling is actually accurate. Something else that I hear very often is we love using Revit for everything except for the detailing. For details, we go back to AutoCAD because it's better for details. I would say that's not true. Sometimes I find that it's an excuse to go back to the old habits, but it's not a good idea. It slows down the transition. Linking CAD to Revit works, but it's kind of a pain. It's not very smooth. I don't recommend it. So my recommendation, stick to Revit for the entire project. And it's not true that CAD is better than Revit for details. If you find the right workflows and the right way to work, Revit is much faster in CAD to draw drawings. And I'm talking about completely 2D views, because most people think in Revit, everything has to be 3D, right? But no, you can create a set of standard details in 2D as well. So you see that I draw CAD as the devil in this line. That's tempting you. My next tip is don't over model. You will see the one after that is don't under model. So you have to find the right balance between not modeling too much, but modeling just enough as well. Sometimes new users might get super excited about BIM. Suddenly they have to model things in 3D, but they do it too much, and it's way too detailed for what they need. In most cases, you still need a set of PDF documents. And if modeling something doesn't help that, maybe it's not worth it. And it makes the model too heavy, too slow. So a rule of thumb, don't model things smaller than 4 inches, 100 millimeters. Of course, that varies, depends what categories of element we're talking about. And you can learn about, here's an acronym, LOD, which means level of development. Clients might require different LODs in different projects. But typically, if you're getting started, just model what you need have your set of documents and have a nice model. At the same time, don't under model. I see other people just using what I call cheap 2D workarounds. They say, oh, this doesn't actually need to be modeled, right? We'll just use 2D to save some time. This never works. It always ends up causing confusion. So make sure that you model all the key elements in your project. I mean, the doors, the wall, the stairs, the roofs, all of that should be accurately modeled. At least like the position, the size, the thickness, the height, all of that should be precise. And yeah, that's an example. In this case, you can see someone drew the stairs with using 2D lines instead of actually modeling the stair. Again, that's not good. Take the time to properly model it. Next is clean your model. So it depends if you're working on a team or by yourself. But an example is, as a BIM manager, every Friday, I will take 15 minutes to clean the model. That means erase views that are not used, purge useless families and content, solve the warning, because a bulky and disorganized model can be frustrating. It's more slow. People are confused when they open it. It feels chaotic. So what you want is a clean, smooth, and fast model. Something else, don't move and delete things by mistake. That's another mistake that I see very frequently. In Revit, you have a tool called Pin. Do I have Revit? Maybe I should show it for a moment. Yeah, there it is. So that's a sample model, the default Autodesk project with the most recent release. So let's say that there's this wall right here, and you're worried that it's going to be moved or deleted. You can hit this little pin icon, and suddenly you cannot move it unless you unpin it. So all the major elements in your project, make sure to pin them. Next, so similar to a slide that I've showcased earlier, but develop a powerful template. So with BIM, much more so than CAD, a powerful template is crucial. Basically, you're taking time in documentation coordination phase and pushing it in the templating phase. It means in your template, you already have content. You have typical walls, typical windows. You have standard detailing. You have standard wall composition. And instead of doing all that work in the middle of a project, it's already done in the template. So a template is built over multiple months, multiple years. It's constantly improved. But with a good template, you will save so much time, and it's going to be much more pleasant for you to work inside of Revit. Something though, you need to have some non-billable hours to work on the template. That's something that sometimes partners don't realize, that you need, like the BIM manager in the firm needs maybe 5 hours a week, or that's actually pretty conservative, but time to work on the template that's not billable to specific clients, right? But that means that in the future, they will save time on upcoming projects. Okay, yeah, develop a library of content in addition to the template. So the template is all the views are named, the view template, the graphics, all of this, but it's also about developing families and components. In Revit, families are little pieces of content, like a wall, like doors, and you can see all the furniture I have in this case. And so it's challenging to have content because there are lots of free families on the internet, but most of them are not very good because they're made by manufacturers, and manufacturers want them to be as detailed as they can. So they're very often super heavy files that are just going to make your model more bloated. So it's much better if you can start with default Autodesk collections, or you can actually buy collections from professional family makers. For example, we recently released our door collection at BIMPure, you can see on the right. And then you can start developing your own content. That's the most ideal, but sadly it takes a lot of time to do as well. Okay, that's the last tip. Create internal protocol plus training. So it's always good to have clear norms and practices and to write them down, right? So basically what I'm saying is that the knowledge and the way to do things inside of Revit, inside of BIM, shouldn't be stuck in someone's head. So you must put that on paper, must put that on the internet and document it. And also make sure that all the knowledge, all the way you work with BIM and Revit is not dependent on a single user, because if that user leaves, you might be in trouble, right? So the way that I do that these days with clients, I love to use Notion. You can use any database, but it's basically a Notion, it's connected page. Basically, it's to build an internal wiki. I like to use Loom. That's an online tool to quickly do screen recordings, and Snagit for screenshot and GIFs. And this way I can quickly generate training and documentation. It's really not long. And the way I see it, anytime I do something that's going to be standard at the firm, I try to record it and have some trace of it. So this way you build a documentation. If you have a user in your team asking you a question, you can say, hey, actually, I've done a little video about it last week, so you can check it out. And so I used to do PDF documentation, but these days I'm pretty much moving to more online databases like Notion. Anyway, the key point here, knowledge about how things are done shouldn't stay stuck in someone's head. Keep that in mind. Okay, so I've saw in my career a lot of, not that many of them to be fair, failed CAD to BIM transitions, or at least transitions that were much longer or much more painful than they should have been. I'm not going to name names, of course, but I can see some commonalities between firms where I saw that. First, the transition was not a priority. As I mentioned, maybe it's one of the partner, the team was not wholly into it. So the leadership was not fully committed to it. Sometimes there was a lack of training, or a lack of having all the licenses, or a lack of good computers and all the hardware. They didn't do the initial investment that CAD to Revit needs for a successful transition. Or something else that I saw, people were waiting for the perfect project to get started. Oh yeah, we're going to do BIM as soon as we have enough time or a good enough project to do it with. And sometimes that project just never comes, or they start with it and they just abandon and go back to CAD. And something else, there's no BIM champion. So to me, having enthusiasm and being excited about this new technology and about new way of doing things is important in the CAD to BIM transition. So identifying someone on your team or hiring someone like that to help you out is crucial. And reverting back to CAD when facing challenges, that's probably the biggest one. We've started in Revit, but we were stuck at this point. We didn't know what to do, so we just exported to CAD and kept working from there. So I actually saw all of these in real life. So I'm wondering in the chat if this is accurate, if you see other failed transition or not optimal transition, if you have anything else you would add to this list.
We've got a few comments, but then we can go over them in the Q&A.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we can wait for the Q&A. So I'm getting close. Now all these steps were more general CAD to BIM tips. They could apply to multiple software, except a few specific things. Like, to be honest, they could even be more generally any technological transition in an organization, right? These are principles that don't just apply to architecture. I would say most of them, at least.
So Nick, how long do you think it would take to get like a full transition? Would that depend on the size of the company or the project itself? How do you feel about it?
How long the transition could go? Yeah, it definitely depends on the size of the firm. Yeah, it depends on their budget. It depends on a lot of things, and I recommend at the same time it's possible to go too fast, right? I think it's good to have a prototype project, a first project, and see how it goes, because you need kind of a core team of people with good Revit knowledge, good BIM knowledge that can then spread the knowledge, right?
Right. I'm fully compromised on the transition as well. And as you've been like talking about it, probably someone that leads this change and, like you said, like be fully compromised with some actually like KPIs or like goals in mind, to prevent getting that in between on going back and forward all the time.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned it somewhere, but it's good to have a clear goal, like having 50% of all projects done in Revit before the end of the year, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends. Maybe the transition, like to me, I would say that the biggest KPIs, you said, it should be maybe having the first completed fully Revit projects,
Right.
no returning to CAD or anything like that. And then when that's done, it's actually a good sign, because then you can spread to more team members. And so, for example, at my last firm, I can see most firms these days to get to 50% of new projects in Revit or BIM within the first year, and maybe within 3 years, all of their projects are done this way. It depends. It can be faster, can be longer.
Right.
As long as they don't abandon along the way.
So yeah, like mostly like the comments that we have on chat are like talk about the challenge of, the team's compromise on this, like at the beginning, getting that feeling of the team being on the same boat, and hiring the proper like specialist for the matter. Samantha also says that she's sick of drawing lines. Then we got to think of families in Revit as blocks in AutoCAD. We've got a few experiences over there.
Yeah, that seems similar to what I see in the industry.
Mm.
Okay, so I'm almost done. I'll show kind of a few tips directly inside of Revit. It's things that people don't always realize. So I have a few files open here. This one is the pro template that I use. This one, let's just create a new project from scratch. So I'm using the latest version of Revit. Let's use Imperial. So when you start a new project in Revit, the first thing that you need to do is to set the levels typically, right? So you have level 1, 2. So I would set that up because all elements in Revit are constraints to levels. So if you model a wall, like the bottom will be at level 1 and the top at level 2 most of the time. So the first thing I would do is set these up properly, right? And something else is understand visibility. Like in CAD, people use layers, like to control the visibility and thickness of elements, line styles, and so on. In Revit, what you see on the screen is what is going to be printed. And a tool that I like to use a lot is called, let's go to another project. Yeah, this one. I have a tool called Thin Lines that's right here, and it turns everything to a thickness of a single pixel. So when you're working, this is super helpful to be more precise and actually see what's going on. But if you uncheck this, unactivate this, you can see how it's going to look like when it's printed. So that's an advantage of Revit. You don't have to mess around with these layers and plot styles, which is kind of boring in my opinion. We shouldn't be doing that in 2024. The project browser, so make sure to keep it organized. Like when I open the Revit model and see what's going on, that's one of the first thing I check. And if I see it's complete chaos in there and a lot of duplicated views, it's typically not a good sign. And it's like when you enter a clean house, you're being more careful not to be too messy, right? But if you enter a house that's chaotic, it's a complete mess, maybe you don't pay as much attention to be careful and keep it clean. So that's something I mentioned earlier, to try to keep healthy Revit models. Something else, always use the link CAD. Don't import CAD, because when you import a CAD file into a Revit model, you actually import the whole file and it's making the Revit model much bigger. So link is always better in this case. And the worst thing that you can do inside of Revit model, please never do this, never, no excuse. Never explode a CAD file inside of Revit, because every single layer is going to be converted to a line style in Revit. So just one of the worst things. I think they should remove this tool, honestly. Okay, and something else that I recommend, I mentioned it earlier, but work side by side with a plan view or 2D view and a 3D view. Keep the 3D model open. So for example, if I'm here, let's say, what's this project? There's a shortcut in Revit. It's WT, window tile, and you can have multiple views open at the same time. If you have multiple monitors, you can put them on different monitors. So you can see there's probably way too much stuff. But in this case, I can see the 3D model, and I can have the floor plan. I can, if I do a change in one of them, I should see it in the floor plan. So it helps a lot to work with multiple views. I mentioned this earlier. All the key elements in your model, make sure to pin them. I've just saw so many times that people forget to pin the elements and they get moved by mistake. Now, since this year, we've moved to a membership model, and you can see everything included inside of the membership. When you subscribe, you'll see this with a series of steps you can take. And with the basics course, this is a beginner's course. We also have more course for design and presentation, managed course if you want to become a BIM manager, Herrick families if you want to develop your own content. And also we have downloadable file, the pro template for Revit, the collection of doors, which we've recently released, the pamphlet. These are actually free. So if you want kind of a free sample, bimpure.com/pamphlets. Enter just share your email, and it's 33 now, free PDF guides. These are pretty popular. They've been downloaded thousands of times. You can see all the topics we've covered, basically any topic that is complex in Revit. We explore and try to make them simple for you. So that's a little freebie you can get. And yeah, we also have live events for members only on various Revit and BIM topics. You can watch the replays of past events and see the upcoming live. Yeah, just for this webinar for the BetterPros folks, we have special promotion. So with code PRO20 at checkout, you get 20% off, and that offer expires on this Monday, the next Monday, in fact. That's BIMPure.com.
You've got to get really fast. That's very kind of you, Nicolas, and thank you for sharing that. And of course, to everyone that has signed up to the event, we're going to send you more information about Nicolas and his website, BIM Pure and all of his courses. He has a huge community in YouTube, so you can go and check on other episodes that he's been talking about this. So, after this event, we're going to send you a whole email with this information, his templates, this presentation, and some other information that we've gathered for you. But before, time runs out, we've got a few questions, Nick. Are you ready?
Yeah, ready.
So we've got that BIM guy, very interesting. He asks, how do you propose AutoCAD details getting converted or done in Revit if you don't explode? Redoing them from scratch?
Yeah, I can specify what I meant by that. So the explode tool, I would say never use it inside of a Revit project. What you can do though is you can create a dummy project where you explode, get what you need, and paste it. A dummy project, I mean, not a real project, kind of a temporary project you create for this. Or you can create a family too and explode inside of the family itself. But overall, the explode CAD is mostly inside of an ongoing Revit project. That's just a terrible thing to do. In other circumstances, inside of a temporary project, it's actually fine.
Okay. And I've got some other question. What is an expected budget to have on this transition? Could you share a few, it's lots of budgets.
Yeah, it depends. I'm trying to think about it, but it depends on the scale of the firm. But first, you have the licenses, right? So it can go up to 4K per person per year. Then you have the training. You can have a live training, or you can get the BIMPure or other trainings elsewhere too, for sure. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. I think, I hesitate to give a precise number. There's so much variables in there that.
Okay, no worries. So we've got another one. Is there a friendly path to work with non-regular shapes and all of that? I sense Revit is quite on the square side.
Yeah, in Revit, there's a tool called the massing tools that's not available with Revit LT, but that can have more of freeform mass or things along those lines. It's a good tool, but I know some people are using a Rhino, which is more known in the architecture world for more freeforms and curves and more complex shapes. And there are a few plugins to bring Rhino geometry inside of Revit. There's a tool called Rhino Inside, and there are a few others. Actually, if I can recommend something, I had a live talk with Jens, is the BIM manager at the Big Architects, one of the most known architecture firms in the world, and he showcased this workflow from Rhino to Revit. So with super complex curves, that can be a way.
Okay, and I don't really like this one. How do I convince my senior that Revit offers significant advantages over CAD? How to be persuasive, pretty much.
Yeah, it's you can use some of the points back in the PDF presentation. I would have to find numbers, statistics in the industry of like time gained, improvement. But it's what else could I say? I mean, it's like, to me, it's the way to go. It don't feel so innovative in 2024 as it used to be, like back when I started in around 2012. So I stay here maybe already a little bit behind the curve if you haven't started transition at all yet.
Right. I know it's hard, when you've got to convince all the team to jump in. But I don't know if we have any other questions. I'm just trying to dig in a little bit, or any other experiences you'd like to share. If not, then we can start saying goodbye. I don't know, Nicolas, if you have any extra thing you'd like to share.
Not for now. Yeah, check out BIMPure.com. Check out the YouTube channel if you like these kind of live events. Having a series with various guests, various experts, experts in their specific Revit niche or BIM niche, and that's called BIMPure Live. So subscribe to the channel and you'll hear more about it. Typically on Wednesdays, typically at this time slot, actually, Wednesday at 3 p.m.
Right, all your lights are on Wednesday. That's right, yes.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so, thank you everyone for joining us. We hope that this presentation has been clear enough and helped you, at least to start thinking about the transition. And if you already started, then to compromise even better and just making all the team jump in to this commitment. So thank you so much, Nicolas. It's always a pleasure to work with you and to, being here with you and hosting the event. You're always so clear and so passionate about what you do. So we're really happy to have you as a partner. So if anyone wants to keep on studying this subject, and if you want to dig in a little bit more, as I've said it before, we've prepared a lot of information after the event. So you'll receive a full email with a lot of other tips. And you, of course, in the chat box, you still have all of our socials. You can follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn. Also, Nicolas as well will let you all the information, not only in the chat box, but also in the following email that you've received. So if you like the content and if you'd like us to keep on talking about this, let us know and we'll be happy to help. So thanks, Nicolas. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks all for the invitation. That was super fun. I had a blast. Really good audience, good comments and questions. So looking forward for another event. Thanks a lot and see you.
Great. We'll see you next time. That's a wrap.
Bye.
Bye-bye.